Hi, I'm Hannah,
And I'm Emmy.
and we are going to teach you how to make a fabric key fob.
But first, watch this quick video on stitch lengths.
Okay, so the first type of stitch length we are going to go over today is the basting stitch length. It is the longest of the stitch lengths and it is 3 to 4 millimeters or 6 to 8 SPI. And it is used for temporary fittings or gathers.
The next type of stitching is called ease stitching. This is 2.4 to 3 millimeters or 8 to 10 SPI, and it's used to fit larger pieces into smaller pieces like a sleeve cap.
The third type of stitching is regulation stitching, and this is 1.7 to 2.4 millimeters or 10 to 14 SPI. This is your everyday stitch length. You use it for everything that will be permanently stitched.
The last type of stitching is reinforcement stitching. The first type of reinforcement stitching is 1 millimeter to 1.5 millimeters or 20 to 24 SPI, and it's used at deep slashes and collar points.
Now that you've learned about stitch lengths, now it's time to go over the supplies you'll need for this project. So of course you'll be needing a sewing machine, an iron and an ironing board, as well as a keychain clamp, contrasting thread, and a matching bobbin, a piece of fabric that's 12 inches by 5 inches, and a pair of pliers. Let's get started. So first things first, we are going to first press our fabric. So we're going to press it in half, hot dog style. Now with that crease down the middle, you're going to open your fabric back up and fold the outside edges towards the middle and again press. After you have pressed both the outside edges in towards the middle, you are going to fold down that original middle crease and press once more. And this piece of fabric should now be 1.25 inches wide. Now that the piece of fabric is all pressed and ready to go, it's time for the sewing machine. So we're going to start with a basting stitch, which is 4 millimeters, so we are going to adjust our stitch length accordingly. Then we are going to line up the piece of our fabric to 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, which is about the edge of the toe. You're going to back stitch 2 inches and then sew all the length of the fabric. Once you have sewn the length of the fabric and you're getting to the end, you are going to backstitch 2 to 3 inches. Now it's time to do the other side of the fabric. And again, we are still in the basting stitch and you're going to backstitch just like we did before and then start sewing the length of the fabric. Now that you have done basting, it's time for ease stitching. Now, ease stitching is approximately 3 millimeters, so we're going to change our stitch length. Now our seam allowance is 1/4 inch, so line up your fabric accordingly. Backstitch at the beginning and end, and sew down the length of your fabric just as we did with the basting. Now it's time for the second row of ease stitching. Again, it's 3 millimeter length, 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you'll backstitch at the beginning and end and go down the length of your key fob.
The next stitch we are going to do is our regulation stitch. So remember, we are going to change our length to 2.4, and then we are going to backstitch at both the beginning and the end of the key fob. And we're sewing about 3/8 of an inch away from the edge. And now we are going to do the same stitch, the regulation stitch, on the other side of the key fob. The last stitch we are going to do is the reinforcement stitch. So we are going to put our machine stitch down to 1 millimeter, and then we are going to sew on the short sides of the key fob. And the reason why we're using regulation is because it will help anchor in all of the other stitches that we have done already. We are going to back stitch at both ends, and we are going to sew at 1/4 of an inch, and then we're going to sew again on the same side at 3/8 of an inch. The last stitch we are going to do is the decorative stitch. So we decided on stitch number 712, which we type into the machine. And then we're going to line up the key fob at 5/8, and then we just start sewing. Now, you can pick whatever kind of decorative stitch that you want, and you just have to make sure that you keep your key fob straight as the machine does its job. The next step is to trim the key fob, and what we are doing is we are trimming the corners of the key fob so it's more able to fit into the clamp.
The final step to finishing your key fob is adding the clamp. You will need a friend for this. So one person is going to hold the clamp up against the key fob, and the other person is going to clamp it with the pliers. And then you have a finished key fob.